The phone buzzed just as Ethan reached for the light, slicing through the quiet with a tremor he felt in his chest. Madison had sent a screenshot, her message sharp as glass, revealing she'd spoken with Dr. Holden on Facebook. The image showed their chat, lines of casual betrayal where the doctor spilled secrets Ethan thought were locked away. Childhood wounds, private fears, every confession he whispered in therapy appeared there like exposed nerves. Madison wrote that she felt deceived, that Ethan had hidden too much, that she deserved the truth he never shared. His vision blurred as he scrolled, each word twisting deeper, turning trust into something sour and dangerous. He tried to breathe, but the room felt smaller, as if those leaked memories were closing in on him. Nothing was safe, not love, not therapy, not the one space meant to hold him together. And in that moment, everything quietly came undone. Ethan spent the next morning scrolling through Madison's profile, hunting for anything that explained the betrayal. He found new posts she had liked, photos she had commented on, all featuring Dr. Holden in subtle ways. A familiar smile from Ethan's therapy sessions appeared in the doctor's profile picture, now sickeningly out of place. A wave of dread rolled through him as he tapped into their public interactions, each more unsettling than the last. Madison had commented on a quote about trust, and Dr. Holden replied with a teasing remark that felt too personal. It wasn't flirtatious, but it carried a tone no therapist should ever use with a patient's partner. Ethan clicked deeper, slipping into the shadows of their online connection, searching for the seams in their story. He found a photo Madison posted days earlier, one he had barely noticed when she showed him at dinner. In the corner, half hidden, Dr. Holden had reacted with a heart emoji that made Ethan's pulse throb painfully. He scrolled to their message exchange next, the place where the truth sat waiting like a lit fuse. The first few lines were harmless, just introductions, but the tone quickly shifted into something colder. Dr. Holden wrote about concerns regarding Ethan's emotional patterns, something Ethan had never allowed him to share. The messages grew longer, more detailed, crossing boundaries that were supposed to protect patients, not exploit them. Ethan felt his throat tighten as he read descriptions of things he confessed in tears, now turned into bullet points. Madison had answered with questions that mirrored his deepest fears, guided by the doctor's clinical authority. It became clear this wasn't accidental disclosure, but a structured conversation shaped by someone holding power. He kept scrolling, hands shaking, as the messages drifted into analysis of his childhood memories. Dr. Holden mentioned moments Ethan barely remembered, details he trusted the therapist to guard with care. Madison responded with sympathy at first, but later with irritation, shaped by the doctor's interpretation of Ethan. Ethan leaned back in his chair, breath trembling, feeling a cold fear lodged beneath his ribs. He realized he wasn't just betrayed, but studied, dissected, and delivered like a case file to someone he loved. He reopened the messages, noticing phrases he had missed, instructions disguised as casual suggestions. The doctor told Madison to observe reactions, to note shifts, to push gently for honesty during conflict. It read like a blueprint, a quiet manipulation wrapped in professional language that made Ethan feel exposed. He checked timestamps, matching them to nights he and Madison argued without knowing why tension escalated. Patterns emerged like bruises, each one shaped by a conversation happening behind his back. A sickening clarity settled in as he realized he had been living inside a script he never agreed to. He clicked through the final exchange, where Madison apologized to the doctor for feeling overwhelmed. Dr. Holden reassured her, offered guidance, and suggested she keep track of Ethan's reactions. The message ended with a smiley face that felt like a knife twisting under Ethan's skin. He closed his laptop slowly, the weight of truth sinking into him like an anchor. This was no misunderstanding. This was a conspiracy built from trust, authority, and the secrets he paid to keep safe. And for the first time, Ethan understood he wasn't dealing with betrayal. He was dealing with violation. Ethan stood outside the apartment door for a long moment, steadying his breath before knocking. Madison opened it slowly, eyes swollen as if she hadn't slept since the night before. She stepped aside without a word, and he walked in, feeling the heaviness hanging in the room. The silence settled between them like dust, thick and impossible to ignore. Ethan asked how long she had been talking to Dr. Holden, his voice thin and frayed at the edges. Madison looked at the floor, twisting her hands as if trying to wring guilt out of them. She said it began with a simple message, one she thought was harmless and even helpful. But the harmless message turned into long conversations, then into trust she never meant to give away. She moved to the couch and sat down, eyes darting as though the words might burn her. Ethan remained standing, afraid he'd collapse if he let his knees bend. Madison admitted she asked the doctor questions she shouldn't have, driven by fear and insecurity. Yet she insisted the answers came too easily, as if he'd been waiting for the opportunity to share. She told Ethan that Dr. Holden revealed his childhood trauma in clinical detail, stripping away the nuance. He described Ethan's panic triggers, emotional patterns, and vulnerabilities, as if reading from a confidential chart. Madison confessed she used that information when they fought, believing it gave her clarity. But instead it twisted everything, turning love into something sharp and uneven between them. Ethan felt each word slice him open, leaving heat behind his eyes that he refused to let spill. He asked what else was shared, bracing himself like a man awaiting a verdict. Madison hesitated, tears slipping down her cheek as she whispered the parts she had hidden. Dr. Holden had explained how Ethan blamed himself for things that weren't his fault, shaping him since childhood. He exposed Ethan's private confessions, the ones spoken in trembling breaths behind closed doors. He even told her Ethan feared abandonment so deeply he might react unpredictably under pressure. Madison admitted she began to see Ethan not as a partner, but as a fragile case file. She said she pushed him during arguments because the doctor suggested testing emotional consistency. Ethan's stomach knotted, realizing their last few months had been rehearsed without his knowledge. He felt manipulated, not only by the therapist, but by the woman he trusted most. Madison cried harder, saying she didn't understand the damage until it was too late to undo. She said the strain grew unbearable, fed by the doctor's warnings and her own confused guilt. Finally, she whispered that she wanted to end the relationship before it collapsed under them both. Ethan closed his eyes, letting the final blow settle into place like a fracture. He told her he wasn't angry about the breakup, only about the betrayal stitched into it. He stepped toward the door, feeling hollow in a way he couldn't name. Madison asked where he was going, her voice cracking as if begging for an answer she already knew. Ethan said he had something to report, something that went far beyond heartbreak. He left the apartment with quiet steps, carrying a truth too heavy to keep inside. And that same afternoon, he filed a formal complaint that would change everything. Within days, Ethan received an email from the licensing board requesting a detailed statement of events. He typed slowly, recounting every message, every conversation, every moment of betrayal with precision. The words felt heavy on his fingers, each sentence a tether to memories he wished he could erase. After sending the report, he expected silence, maybe the usual bureaucratic delay. Instead, messages began appearing from strangers claiming to be patients of Dr. Holden. Each message opened another layer of disbelief, revealing stories he could hardly fathom. One woman wrote that her personal journal had been shared without consent, her secrets dissected. Another described phone calls, where the doctor led her to doubt her own memories and instincts. A man reported that Dr. Holden had instructed his partner to test him during arguments. Patterns emerged, eerily similar to Ethan's own experience with Madison and Dr. Holden. Ethan realized he was no longer alone. These were not isolated incidents. They were victims caught, in a web of manipulation spanning years. He began organizing the messages, knotting dates, details, and methods of the doctor's influence. It was clear there was a systematic abuse of trust and authority at play. Some patients had hesitated to come forward, fearing judgment or retaliation. Others shared screenshots and recordings that mirrored Ethan's evidence almost perfectly. They recounted private therapy sessions, confidential disclosures, and emotional manipulation. Each story reinforced the terrifying pattern Ethan had first glimpsed alone. They began communicating with one another, forming a quiet network of support. Ethan felt a surge of responsibility to help them, to ensure their voices reached the board. He coordinated shared evidence, timelines, and the intricate web of Dr. Holden's misconduct. They exchanged advice on handling interviews, preserving documentation, and coping with anxiety. The group grew cautiously, gaining confidence in their collective truth. Ethan was both amazed and horrified by the scale of violation he had stumbled into. Each message revealed not only secrets betrayed, but the careful planning behind them. Dr. Holden had conditioned partners and patients to act as observers, manipulators, and witnesses. The network identified specific methods used repeatedly to exploit trust and gather private information. Ethan compiled everything into a single, comprehensive file for the licensing board. They labeled evidence meticulously: dates, times, conversations, and behavioral patterns. The board responded immediately, requesting formal statements from other patients. Victims were interviewed one by one, corroborating Ethan's account and providing new insights. Ethan began feeling the weight of responsibility lighten slightly, replaced by resolve. The realization that Dr. Holden's actions had harmed many gave him purpose. He coordinated meetings between patients to share experiences and build mutual support. They spoke cautiously at first, then with growing confidence as their stories aligned. Every corroboration strengthened the case, creating a clear pattern of ethical violation. Ethan documented each meeting, each exchange, knowing this evidence could determine outcomes. Through the chaos, a sense of unity emerged among the victims, tempered by shared trauma. Ethan understood that this was no longer a personal battle. It was a fight for justice. The quiet network of patients became a collective voice, ready to confront abuse and reclaim power. One evening, Madison sent Ethan a message that made him pause mid-step. Her words were hesitant, trembling, carrying a weight he hadn't expected. She said she had more to tell him, a truth that could change everything. Ethan met her at a small cafe, a neutral space to hear what she had to say. Madison's hands shook as she pushed a folded piece of paper across the table. She explained that Dr. Holden had been the one to initiate contact with her first. He suggested ways she could observe Ethan, planting the idea that he might be dangerous. Madison had thought she was acting on her own instincts, but it had been guided. The doctor instructed her to provoke reactions and report them back in detail. He framed it as research, concern for Ethan's mental state, and a test of stability. Madison confessed she felt conflicted, but Dr. Holden had made her feel responsible. Every move, every argument had been shaped subtly, invisibly, by his direction. Ethan felt a surge of anger, realizing the extent of the manipulation he had endured. Madison showed him messages he had never seen, instructions hidden in casual phrasing. She admitted Dr. Holden had advised her on how to explain things if Ethan discovered the truth. The doctor had coached her to cover his tracks, to protect himself from accountability. Ethan read the words, each sentence igniting a mix of rage and disbelief. It became clear that Dr. Holden had not just betrayed him, but orchestrated the entire situation. Madison looked down, ashamed, confessing she hadn't realized she was being used. Ethan's mind raced, connecting the dots between arguments, instructions, and private disclosures. The paper in front of him held the key evidence, detailing manipulation in step-by-step form. He realized this was more than violation. It was deliberate exploitation of trust and love. Madison explained that she had grown confused, believing the doctor's narrative at first. He told her Ethan was a risk, that she had to test and report on him, all under the guise of care. Ethan's chest tightened as the final pieces of the puzzle fell into place. He saw how carefully he had been controlled, from therapy sessions to personal interactions. Madison handed him screenshots, notes, and summaries she had kept, fearing she might forget. The proof was undeniable. Dr. Holden was the architect of manipulation, not a passive participant. Ethan felt a chill, knowing he finally had the evidence to expose the truth. Madison apologized repeatedly, her voice cracking with guilt and fear. Ethan nodded, holding the papers close, realizing he needed to act before more damage occurred. She warned him she had been caught in the doctor's influence, but now she wanted to help. Ethan assured her that her cooperation could strengthen the case and protect others. The realization hit him. Dr. Holden's manipulation extended beyond Madison, affecting multiple lives. Every argument, every breakdown had been monitored, recorded, and guided by him. Ethan felt a mixture of relief and dread, knowing the confrontation was only beginning. He promised Madison he would use the evidence responsibly, reporting the doctor fully. She gave him a final look, silent but heavy with shared understanding and regret. Ethan left the cafe with the documents, the weight of truth solid and actionable in his hands. He knew the next steps would decide justice, accountability, and the end of Dr. Holden's deception. For the first time, he felt empowered, armed with undeniable proof and a clear purpose. The manipulation that had haunted him was now visible, laid bare for the world to see. The day of the hearing arrived with a tension that made Ethan's hands tremble. The room was crowded with patients, lawyers, and board members waiting for testimony. Dr. Holden entered calmly, projecting control, but his eyes betrayed slight unease. Ethan sat among other victims, clutching the documents Madison had given him. The first witness spoke quietly, describing breaches of privacy and manipulative techniques. Each account mirrored Ethan's experience, building a pattern impossible to ignore. Screenshots and messages were displayed, showing private therapy sessions shared without consent. Dr. Holden's expression flickered, a brief crack in the facade of authority he maintained. The second witness detailed conversations where he had guided partners to provoke reactions. The audience murmured, shocked by the scale and methodical nature of his violations. Ethan felt a surge of resolve as he realized their collective voices could not be silenced. Another patient testified about emotional manipulation, explaining how trust had been weaponized. The board members nodded, taking notes, clearly recognizing the seriousness of the infractions. Dr. Holden rose to respond, voice initially calm, defending his actions as concern for patients. He accused some patients of misinterpreting guidance and claimed they were conspiring against him. His explanations faltered as evidence was presented, contradicting every defense he attempted. Madison took the stand last, her hands still trembling but her voice steady. She described being coached to observe and provoke Ethan, following his instructions carefully. She detailed how the doctor directed her interactions and guided her narrative to conceal wrongdoing. The board members listened intently, some exchanging glances at the depth of manipulation. Ethan presented his compiled evidence, highlighting patterns, timelines, and repeated misconduct. The documents included messages, notes, and witness statements corroborating every claim. Dr. Holden's composure crumbled as the scale of his actions became undeniable. He raised objections, attempted deflection, but the facts were too explicit, too complete. Victims continued to testify, each adding another layer to the clear portrait of ethical violation. One by one, they described personal trauma caused by his betrayal and abuse of authority. The room grew tense, the weight of truth pressing down on everyone present. Ethan watched as Dr. Holden became visibly frustrated, his arguments collapsing under scrutiny. Board members asked pointed questions, forcing him to acknowledge details he had hoped to hide. By the end of the day, the evidence was overwhelming, his defenses hollow and inconsistent. The chair of the board announced they would deliberate immediately, citing clear violations. Ethan felt a mixture of exhaustion and relief, knowing justice was within reach. Minutes later, the verdict was read. Dr. Holden's license was revoked permanently. The board referred his case to the state attorney for prosecution under multiple violations of HIPAA. Victims exhaled, some weeping quietly, as the weight of accountability settled on the doctor. Madison left the stand, a sense of closure tempered by the pain of truth finally revealed. Ethan walked out, carrying the relief of vindication and the certainty that the manipulation had ended. The hearings had exposed a deliberate pattern of abuse, ensuring Dr. Holden could harm no one else. Ethan knew their courage had made the difference, and that justice, though slow, had finally arrived. After the hearing, Dr. Holden faced a storm of legal consequences that quickly escalated. Multiple patients filed civil suits, seeking damages for the violations he had committed. The courts ruled against him in nearly every case, ordering substantial financial restitution. Legal fees piled up, adding another layer of pressure to an already collapsing life. The state attorney charged him for multiple HIPAA violations, initiating criminal proceedings. He was fined heavily and placed under supervised probation for a defined term. Insurance companies refused coverage, leaving him personally liable for all pending claims. Bank accounts were frozen, and creditors began pursuing repayment aggressively. He attempted to sell his practice, but potential buyers withdrew after discovering the violations. Assets were liquidated to satisfy legal judgments, leaving him with almost nothing. His reputation in the mental health community was irreparably damaged. Professional networks distanced themselves, and former colleagues refused contact. Speaking engagements and workshops he had scheduled were canceled or reassigned. Clients who once praised him publicly now shared their stories of betrayal online. Social media amplified the damage, making his misconduct widely known and documented. Dr. Holden sought alternative work, attempting to rebrand as a life coach. However, his history of ethical violations followed him, casting doubt on his credibility. He struggled to attract clients, as the public record detailed every disciplinary action. Even minor consulting opportunities vanished, leaving him largely unemployable. The stress of legal battles, financial ruin, and social ostracism took a toll on his health. He faced isolation, living in a small apartment with few visitors and no professional support. Former patients continued to contact the board or media, reinforcing his negative reputation. He tried to defend himself in public statements, but each claim was met with skepticism. Lawyers and journalists repeatedly cited the court rulings and board decisions against him. Attempts to write a book or create programs failed due to widespread distrust. His personal relationships suffered, with friends and family distancing themselves from the scandal. Every interaction reminded him of the choices that had led to his downfall. Dr. Holden's life became a cautionary tale for professionals about ethical responsibility. Despite efforts to rebuild, he could not escape the consequences of deliberate misconduct. His practice was gone, income vanished, and professional licenses permanently revoked. The court-mandated restitution and fines consumed what little he had left. Even small businesses or coaching engagements refused to associate with his name. Public exposure ensured that his misconduct remained accessible to anyone researching him. The humiliation and loss of trust were constant companions, shaping every day. Eventually, he attempted to start anew as a life coach, but opportunities were scarce. The label of former therapist with ethical violations overshadowed any skill he could offer. Dr. Holden lived with the tangible results of deliberate manipulation and betrayal. His life had been dismantled piece by piece, leaving financial ruin and social isolation. The consequences were severe, permanent, and undeniable, a direct result of his choices. Through the collapse, those he harmed began to heal, while he faced the full weight of justice. Months later, Ethan began therapy with a new clinician who prioritized trust and transparency. He felt relief in a space where his experiences were honored, not exploited or judged. Madison reached out, apologizing sincerely and sharing that she had started her own therapy journey. Ethan listened, recognizing her growth and the difference between manipulation and genuine care. He realized he had not been overly sensitive or paranoid. His instincts had been correct. The sense of betrayal slowly gave way to clarity and a renewed commitment to self-protection. Ethan joined a support group with other victims, sharing experiences and learning from each other. They discussed patterns of unethical therapy and strategies to recognize manipulation early. Together, they began documenting guidelines for patients to protect themselves in the future. Ethan found strength in helping others, transforming his trauma into advocacy and awareness. He felt empowered, no longer haunted by secrecy, and confident in his ability to set boundaries. The network of survivors became a community, offering guidance and emotional support. Ethan understood that recovery was ongoing, but he now had tools and allies to navigate it. The past no longer controlled him. He reclaimed his sense of safety and personal agency. In the quiet moments, he reflected on resilience, trust, and the power of speaking truth. He looked forward, carrying lessons learned and a commitment to protect both himself and others. Ethan's journey ended not in despair, but in restored hope, clarity, and cautious optimism.